Welcome to episode 20 of the Athletic Philosopher podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jordan Goldstein, former university professor of sport history, philosophy, sociology, psychology, hockey, culture, current life coach, fitness coach, endurance training coach, all the above, none of the above, most of the time somewhere in between. And I'm very excited for today's episode. It's a chance for me to express something that I've felt deeply for a long time inside myself and have been expressing through, we'll say, physical feats now for probably coming up on maybe 6-7 years or so, and that is this absolute loving embrace of the winter and how to effectively turn the tables on this season where most people are shuttering themselves off from the outside world. They're hibernating. They are neglecting to adventure. They're neglecting to, I would say, expose themselves to the lessons and the challenges of this beautiful winter season. And I'm just going to go all over the place in this one, I think, when it comes to what I believe about the winter, what I've learned about it through my studies and experiences, and how I think everybody listening can take this negative energy around winter and completely change it into something that's positive and really powerful. Okay, so let me just give you a bit of an introduction on my experiences with the winter. So I'm Canadian. I grew up in southwestern Ontario, which is the southernmost part of Canada, but it doesn't mean it's warm or lacking of snow. I grew up in a city that was located just off of what we call a snow belt, and that is streamers of lake effect snow that blow across the tiny strip of land in between, in this case, Lake Huron and Lake Erie and Lake Ontario. And so the wind will whip across these freezing cold lakes and it picks up moisture and it drops an incredible amount of snow. I was just talking with my teammate, coaching partner, one of my best friends, Dylan Spina, who lives right now in the city that I grew up in, and he grew up in New Jersey. So he's got a little bit of experience with the snow, but not quite like what we've got in the past week. And so I was explaining to him that it was not uncommon for us to get 2 feet of snow, 3 feet of snow in a day. I remember during my undergrad, the day before final exams in third year, we got 6 feet of snow in one day, and the university canceled all the in-person exams, which if you know a little bit about universities, they do not cancel exams, so it was a big deal. And growing up, we just had the typical winter experience, right? Tobogganing, skating outside, cross-country skiing. We didn't do downhill skiing, but I've done it before. And just like everything that goes along with that, shoveling snow, scraping off ice on your car, coming in for hot chocolates, building snowmen, building snow forts, building igloos, just having a really great time in the winter as a kid is something that I think we lose over time, right? There's this wonder and this mystery to the winter that kids just love. Like, I'm watching my kids, 6 and 3. I've got a 3-year-old son and a 6-year-old daughter, and the first big snowfall of the year was a few days ago, and they're running around, they're trying to catch the big snowflakes on their tongue. My little man is picking up snow with his bare hands, and then 5 minutes later realizing his hands are frozen and crying because he's not thinking about, oh, this is a bad thing that I'm experiencing. It's, what is this new thing? What is this challenge? What is this thing that I can explore, this snow that I can mold, this ice I can slide on, this cold air that kind of bites me in the face? What is it all? And they have a wonder. And it's this childlike appreciation for the challenge that I think adults need to more properly bring into their mindsets when it comes to dealing with the winter. And even though I have all these really nice memories of the winter growing up, and I'm watching my children, have similar memories out in the winter, I wasn't somebody who embraced the winter. I was somebody who would complain about the winter, 95% of the time, and then the 5% of the time that I was doing fun things, I would enjoy the winter. And this all started to change for me when I was a PhD student and I was researching the beginnings of Canadian sport nationalism. Right, my dissertation topic was in the donation of the Stanley Cup, which is Canada's national ice hockey trophy, and I really needed to get a handle and a deep understanding of the power of winter sports to create a kind of a Canadian character, or to put more specifically, the power of the winter to give a Canadian identity. Right? There's the stereotype that Canadians all live in igloos, and we have polar bears for pets, and while that's tongue in cheek, it's stereotypes are often based in truth. And Canada is a very cold, inhospitable, and challenging place to live. I just mentioned I lived in the southernmost part of Canada, and it's not uncommon to get a foot or 2 feet of snow in a day in the winter, and for temperatures to plunge and to be just freezing cold. And there's only one part of Canada that doesn't get winter, and that's sort of the lower mainland and Vancouver Island out in British Columbia. And I legitimately don't consider those people Canadian. It's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but for real, we live in such a big, disparate land, and our experiences are so different, except for the binding element of the winter, like the binding element of this difficult, challenging weather that we all have to deal with. And I'm reading these 19th century Canadian nationalists who are talking about the invigorating cold, the bracing fresh air that is a youthful tonic, and how outdoor exercise is effectively the best representation of a Canadian when they're doing it outside in the winter. And you read enough of this literature, and I effectively got propagandized by these 19th century Canadian nationalists, people like George Beers, this dentist from Montreal who was instrumental in promoting lacrosse as Canada's first national sport. But then he became a real important promoter for maybe the most famous cultural institution in Canada in the 19th century, the Montreal Winter Carnivals, that took place in the 1880s and the 1890s. And lo and behold, that's actually the place where hockey was first introduced to the world. So there's a lot of really interesting, historical things in sport that are going on in Canada. But the thing that I want you to pay attention to out of the story here is people who are coming across from, the British Isles or Western Europe at the time, coming over and just getting smacked with the winter, absolutely bludgeoned. You think about somebody like, sorry to do the history lesson, but I am a prof, and, this is a bit of a heady podcast at times. Somebody like Samuel de Champlain, the founder of New France, right? The guy who founded Quebec City and Montreal in the early 17th century. He's coming over with guys from Normandy. Yeah, and Normandy is, in northern France. It's not a beautiful, warm, mild climate, but it certainly ain't like Quebec City and Montreal with the deep freezes and the feet of snow and the months of cold, dark winter. And one of the things that Samuel de Champlain and the first habitants of New France, discovered was the importance of exploration, adventure, and fun to get through the wintertime. Samuel de Champlain created a fraternal order known as the Order of Good Cheer, and this was the way that everybody in New France, in this tiny little colony, basically got through the winter. The way that the Order of Good Cheer worked was that, somebody would be selected to go out and hunt during the day, and they would have to come back and provide maybe Maybe they could find some berries. Maybe they could hunt a hare, right? But there was this idea that everybody was going to be responsible for going out and helping to provide. And then with whatever they came back with, there would be a feast or a celebration. There'd be song, there'd be dance, right? So there's this idea of going out into the winter, out into the cold, meeting the challenge head on, and celebrating that achievement. Now, that type of an ideal, that type of an identity actually morphed into the very first organized sports in Canada. And I'll just take 1 second here to talk about the Montreal Snowshoe Club, one of the most famous sporting clubs in Canada in the 19th century. These were kind of like middle class office workers, people who are sitting at a desk, very similar to the way a lot of us live our lives. And out on the weekends, what these snowshoers would do is they would dress like the old voyageurs. So these were the people from New France who would traverse the waterways, the ancient highways of Canada, to go inland, basically all the way to the Great Lakes and beyond, to reach the inland tribes and effectively trade for the very precious furs that were on the in the interior. And that's the economic power of Canada, was the fur trade. And so you've got these middle-class office workers up on a Saturday morning. They're dressing in these kind of like costumes that remind them and are kind of like representations of their ancestors who really did go out and explore and traverse, right? And if anybody's ever been to Montreal, and if you haven't, go. Best city in Canada by far. There's a big giant hill in the middle of the city, right? Montreal's on an island. There's this big hill in the middle of the island. It's called Mount Royal. And there's this beautiful park that sits there now, Mount Royal Park. It was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted, who is the guy who designed Central Park. And it's really amazing, but before that urban park, it was just this big hill with, lots of trees. And you can still kind of go like hiking through Mount Royal, and it's pretty neat and a lot of fun to do. But you'd have, dozens of these office workers getting up in the early morning. They get on their snowshoes, they get on their costumes, and they would tramp up all over Mount Royal with all these different routes. And then they would effectively like get to the other side, go to a pub or an inn, and then they would, drink and feast and have a good time. But they were effectively embodying the spirit that is required to get through the winter in Canada, which is meeting it head on, embracing it, and getting outside and being active directly in the winter. And this has given Canada a tremendous winter sporting culture, and ultimately, has helped define us as a country, right? So as I am studying this, as I am reading this, I am looking at myself, right, compared to these 19th century nationalists and sporting enthusiasts, and thinking, man, I'm soft, I'm weak. Like, I have modern electricity. I've got all these luxuries that even people in the 19th century at this time didn't have, let alone the indigenous, right? The indigenous, the native tribes who lived in this, lived in this land for thousands of years, continuously, right? The European settlers, the colonists who came over, they learned from the indigenous. They learned that the only way to get through the winter is to go through the winter, and to go through it with resolve and cheer, and kind of almost like a stoic joy. And it just made me reflect on my own poor attitude towards the winter. And, this is probably about 10 years ago that I made a conscious shift in mindset that I was not going to allow the winter to beat me down mentally anymore, and that I was going to do my best to at least embrace the idea of the winter. And I mentioned George Beers before, and there's a quote that stuck out in my mind, and literally it's the thing that plays like a ticker tape in my head over and over again in the weekend. And the quote, it's something like this. If it's not exactly these words, it's very close. It's close enough. It's something like, Canadians, rather than let Jack Frost be their master in misery, make him their companion in sport. It's something like that. Like rather than just allowing the winter to dictate my emotions, my psychological state, dark, cold, dreary, gloomy, we rise above it by matching that energy with physical challenge, right? And then when we meet it with physical challenge, we're able to overcome the adversity and find the joy, but also find like the deep lessons that you learn when you embrace the winter as opposed to like hiding from it or, just let's be frank, being weak throughout it. So I want to now share the mindset and some of the tactics that I use to define the winter as the season of growth. Like most people will think of the winter as this season of hibernation, of solitude, of closing up, right? I view it completely differently. I am interested in flowing with the seasons. I'm not interested in fighting against nature. Like I'm a part of nature. Why would I fight against it? I would rather go with it. And there's this rhythm to the seasons. There's this rhythm to winter, going into spring, coming into summer, into fall, back into winter. And humans have been intuitively and deeply connected to this seasonal rhythm, like for the vast majority of our existence, except for when we have been artificially crammed into these cities, especially in the modern world. And technology, I think, conceals that seasonal energy. We've got artificial light. So it doesn't matter if the sun goes down at 5 o'clock. I can light up everything that I want, right? Inside my house, and it can be as if it's not even dark outside, right? Same thing with easy access to heat. We're kind of concealed, right, from the energy of the seasons with our modern luxuries, our modern conveniences. I'm not saying we shouldn't have the modern luxuries and the modern conveniences, but what we then need to do is make an extra effort to go out and tap into that seasonal energy, right? We need to embrace that. And in the winter, the way that I like to describe the winter is just everything is harder. Like everything is harder. I will give an example from last night. Like I had to take both of my kids to figure skating practice, which, 2 kids, close pickup, early dinner, off to figure skating. Like there's a lot of things that have to happen. And it's not as if it's like the most difficult thing you have to do in the day, but dealing with a 6 and a 3-year-old with a time constraint, there's pressure involved. And, in the fall on a sunny day, you just sort of walk out the door, you grab your stuff, you hop in the car, you drive on over. The drive is quick. It's no problem. Last night, when I just go to pick up my kids, I've got to scrape ice and snow off my car because we are having a snowstorm that's also mixed with ice, which is basically freezing the snow onto my car windows, right? So I got to, before I can even get my kids, I've got to scrape my car off while in a storm just so I can go get them. Then when I'm driving, I have to make sure my car doesn't slide off into the ditch. Like I live in a rural spot. The roads are slippery. They're slippery. The visibility is not great in a storm. It's quite dangerous. And so, a 5-minute drive turns into a 10-minute drive because you can't go as fast, right? And now that puts a time crunch into everything else that has to go on. And even in the, 40 minutes in between me picking my kids up, coming back home, having dinner, and going back out for figure skating, there's a whole fresh new layer of frozen snow out on the car. So I gotta get the kids in the car. Even like getting my son in the car seat, it's so much more difficult because he's got to wear this big giant winter coat. I got to get the car seat straps over him. I have to do this with like freezing cold fingers, right? Because it's cold. Let alone scrape off the ice again. Let alone now go back and drive through the blizzard to get to figure skating practice. Right? And then what happens when you come out of figure skating practice? It's another hour and a half of your car getting battered by snow and ice. So you got to do the whole thing all over again. You got to do what's a 10-minute drive is now a 20-minute drive, right? Every little thing in winter is so much more difficult. And why do I call this a season of growth? Because it simplifies things. Like, I don't have time to worry about all these different variables or procrastinations. Like, I really got to get dialed into the fundamentals. If figure skating practice is on the docket, then I don't need the normal 30 minutes. I need an hour. I need an hour to make sure that I can get it done. And that's going to force me to cut time. It's going to force me to cut activities that aren't moving me forward. It's going to really focus the hierarchy of values that I have, because everything is just more difficult. Everything is just more difficult. Like even this morning, right? It's garbage day. I can't even get to my garage where I can like just put the recycling in and put the compost out without first shoveling this 6 inches, 8 inches of snow ice mix off the back of my deck, right? So even just to go and get the garbage out, there's an extra 5 minutes. Okay, so this is why people crack under the winter's pressure, because you do this for a month, it's annoying. It's okay, I can do it. 2 months, 3 months, stretching into 4 months. There's some people in this country that have this like weather for 5 or 6 months. Like the challenge is immense. And so if you want to come through strong, you're forced to level up. You're forced to grow. You're forced to get stronger in your mindset, right? And I just love that. I love that about the winter. Rather than getting beat down by it, I just view it all as a challenge. I just view it all as something to overcome, as something to grow through. The season of growth. I want energy, right? What are some of the things that I do to help me stay on the attack, stay on the offense against winter? Like, you're never going to beat winter. That's the first thing. Like, the seasonal energy of winter is not going to be conquered. You're not going to conquer the cold and the ice. It's not going to happen. The best you can do is become a companion, become a friend, right? If you can't beat them, join them. That's why winter sports are so powerful. That's why going for a run on a beautiful sunny day in the winter when it's like way colder than you want it to be, right? But you still go out and you make it happen. You get that feeling of conquering. Like, it's more expressed. Like, the challenge is harder, so when you accomplish something in it, it feels greater. It feels greater. So I don't even know. I don't have a number off the top of my head. Let's just see how many we get to. So I'm going to throw out a bunch of tips for everybody here to end this off, because my kids are going to be waking up in about 10 minutes and it's winter and I got to get them off to school, right? So we're not going to be skipping time here. So I've talked a bit about mindset, about my mindset, about the history that has inspired this mindset. So what do you do? What do you do? The absolute number one rule of getting through the winter. The absolute number one rule of getting through the winter. When you see the sun, get outside. That's it. The thing with the winter is the gloominess, is the darkness, it's the gray, right? It's the lack of vitamin D. It's the lack of sunshine. It's that lack of warmth. But there are those days where the sun shines so bright and it is warm, even though the air is cold. You need to get outside, even if it's for 5 minutes, even if it's for like 10 seconds. I don't care. Get outside and feel the sun. If you can get your skin, right? Like, roll up your sleeves, like, take your shirt off, whatever. Just get some sunshine on you. Any chance you get is going to make an immense difference. Number 2, explore winter sports. Explore the types of activities you can only do in winter, so that when winter comes, you're excited for it. I love ice skating. My kids love downhill skiing. We love tobogganing. We like building snow forts. There are things that we enjoy doing in the winter that we can only do in the winter. I can't skate on a frozen lake outside in the summer. That's something I can only do in winter. I can't go for a beautiful snowy trail run in the summer where the entire forest is glistening and glowing and sparkling with ice crystals as a bright hot sun, right, rises off in the horizon. There are certain elements of winter that give us an opportunity to play, and we have to take advantage. So go and try different winter sports: tobogganing, cross country skiing, snowshoeing, downhill skiing, skating, sledding. There's all these different options for you. Just get out there, just explore, just have fun. Number 3, get good gear. Get good winter gear. Spend the money on good boots, on good gloves, on good shoes, on a nice coat, on snow pants, right? On neck warmers, on hats. You don't like the cold because you're feeling the cold, but if you dressed properly, you wouldn't feel the cold and you'd be able to move through the winter enjoying yourself. Like, there's no heroism in being cold for the sake of cold. Like, when I was in high school and, in university, I would wear the most amount of winter gear possible, and other people would look at me like with two heads, and I'd say, there's nothing cool about being cold, guys. Like, it's cool that you got your style and you're wearing your jeans or your nice jacket, but like, you're freezing and I'm warm and happy. And gear's a really important part of the winter. So definitely don't skimp on the gear and get yourself some good ones. Number 4, supplement. Vitamin D plus K2. We're not getting the sun. It's kind of freaky. We need that vitamin D. It's going to help our mood. It's going to help us ward off illness. So definitely get yourself a good vitamin D plus K2. It helps absorb the vitamin D, and you'll be feeling good. Number 5, get a big pot. Cook soup, cook stew, have something going. There's nothing like going outside into the back, building like a snow fort or a snowman, or just like skating on the backyard rink for hours and hours, and then coming in and smelling what's on the stovetop, and just knowing that the house is warm, and sort of like there's something about that aroma, and then that feeling of coming in from the cold. And so again, like, lean into the energy. Soups, stews, like warm, hearty meals, things that stick to the ribs. Not really going to go down super nice like on a hot summer day, but man, it hits in the winter, right? And ultimately, like, that's why we need to celebrate winter. There are things that occur in winter that are the best in winter, and we should celebrate that. There are only certain things we can do, like activity-wise, in the winter. There's only certain sports that we can play when we have snow, when we have ice. Shoot, we've got an entire Winter Olympics team. This should tell you something. This should tell you something about the vitality and the vigor that comes with the winter. It's not a place and time to shut down and to hibernate. We're not bears. The human is meant to adventure and explore, right? We've colonized every single spot of this earth. We can live in the hottest deserts, but we can also live in the frozen, cold tundra without trees or sunlight. So we have it inside of us. We just have to be strong enough and courageous enough to bring it out when most people around us are weak and cowardly when it comes to this most beautiful of all the seasons. And so my challenge to everybody out there is to pick up a new winter sport this winter, this season. Try it out and see how much more fun you have when you are out there embracing winter as opposed to being imprisoned by it. All right? I think there's a little person behind me, so breakfast has started. Peace and love. We'll see you in the next one.